ready. First, we have David Chen. Second, Thomas Ferguson. Third, Rodney Haynes. Fourth, Todd Kenneth. And fifth, Dave Staniforth. So as you come up to speak, it's 5 minutes. And then there'll be time for questions if councillors ask. So, Mr. Chen, please go ahead.
Your Worship and honored council members, thank you for the privilege of, again, taking a moment of your time to speak. As you know, my name is David Chen. I'm a financial planner. I'm also a renter in Strathcona, so I am a neighbor to a lot of the people on the downtown east side, as well as within our community. There are a lot of people that are within BC Housing and are on social services. This project is difficult. I don't envy your position. There are elements of it that are really important, really nice, but there are also elements that are very troubling. And the problem is that you have a decision that's very binary. It's support or decline. And because of that, unfortunately, I have to say that I don't support this because there are some problems. First of all, there's an affordability issue, and it's been brought up by many of the council members here, and it's also within the documentation that 50% of this is at market rate. The market rate they've put there within their own parameters says that you would need an income of $100,000 a year to afford that. The median income in Vancouver is about $80,000. That means that this is not affordable to the majority of the people out there. Now, when you're thinking about affordability, this is not just about providing supply. The analogy I like to use is like a gas war. If you bring another retailer online with the same price, no change in price. You bring a retailer online that has a lower price, suddenly you have a gas war. And that's what's more likely to trigger a change. So I think that, knowing that during the election, Councillor Carr, you've said previously, you've questioned whether or not this is the right supply. Your Worship, you've also said you want to bring affordable housing online. I would say make a stance and say we need to commit to these affordable rates, not this 50% CMHC. It is not affordable for the majority of Vancouverites. There are also people that point out that even the Hills rate is not really affordable. And I can say that I would actually buy that. There are a lot of people I've talked to that say, I can't afford to have a family. Well, why is it that you have to be able to afford to have a family to have a family? Wouldn't this be a better society if we actually had affordable housing so that you could conceive to have a family, whether or not you could do that in a market rate or not? Now, we have to think about this. This is the future of Vancouver. The tax base is governed by how many people that you have here, youngsters that are coming up online. A recent newspaper report pointed out that 40% of Vancouverites don't expect their children to stay in Vancouver. That's a startling number of loss. So I think that we really need to think about what we're doing with that. Now, looking at two other problems, another one is with the pollution. And I know some people go, what are you going to do about it? Well, actually, we have technology for that. One of my clients used to make scrubbers for cruise liners. So you can install scrubbers into the air circulation system to at least significantly reduce the pollution problem. There have been articles that have been published that point out that any high density that's placed around industrial routes has a significant increase in the pollution that the residents are exposed to. So I think we need to think about that, especially when you're trying to sell this as a family housing project. The next thing that's problematic is actually parking. So during the election, we had a lot of discussions with people with disabilities. And the interesting thing that we didn't think about at the time is that disabilities actually increases with age. The probability that you're going to suffer mobility disability as you age is going to be quite dramatic. And a lot of those individuals have pointed out that they prefer to use their own mechanized transport. They can't use bicycles. They don't want to use transit, DART vehicles, hard to get a hold of, forget taxis and things like that. Now, as we move into the future, we're talking about electrifying vehicles. So I would ask you this question. How do you recharge your vehicle if it's a personalized motorized transport if you don't have a place to park the thing? So what you have with the parking number now is great for today. Add 20 years, and when people start having families and they start aging and they start having disabilities, that's what you need to anticipate. You're building a building with a 60-plus year lifespan. Think about that future need. So with that all in mind, I would say that, unfortunately, I actually have to say I don't support this project until you can actually fix those components. Thank you.
Thank you. You've got a couple questions if you just want to hang on there one sec. And Councillor Dejanova, please go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Mr. Chen, how would you had said that we should set the rates to be lower, but I'm wondering how you would then suggest that the project is paid for and maintained, because I mean, you're getting into specific election promises, but you also, during the election, said that things needed to be sustainable. So how would you propose paying for the property maintenance with lower rents, considering the cost of the building? And have you ever seen or gone through a pro forma for a building like this?
So the interesting thing is we all went to that pro forma talk with purpose-built rentals, and I've seen the numbers, and I get where they can cut costs and things like that. I also know where they can jig costs. Now, one of the things to answer your question is within our strata, we had an interesting situation where we had an excess of parking. So I've seen within some of the building codes it recommends something like 0.8 per unit. And I think that's a decent number because even if you have excess, you can rent out those spots. And those spots can bring in revenue to the building. You know, again, it is also social housing. So you're asking a problem from a commercial market type of perspective when it's a social housing thing, which really is still very dependent on government help.
Okay, well, I mean, if you take something from one bucket, then there's less in that bucket. You have to, you know, I'm not sure that my question was answered, but I'm not sure that it was understood. So I'll try and ask a similar question to another one of your comments, but you had said that housing for people earning 100 or households. You said people, but I'm guessing you mean households.
Well, it's households,
earning
yes.
$100,000 a year. That's who this would sustain. Those people are classified as the missing middle, or they would be people kind of in my age group, the millennial age group, who are leaving Vancouver because they can't afford housing here. So do you think that there's not a need for that income bracket to have rental housing at these rates?
There's always need, but like everything else, when you can set a rate so it's more affordable, you have more ability to move around. So if you have people that have higher income and there's capacity, certainly you can rent it to them. If you have more people that have a lower capacity, if your numbers work with the lower numbers, then that's what you can support. I mean, this is the thing. Within business, you can go, okay, we're going to just go, these are our costs, and we don't care what the end rent is.
Well, so the first part of my question was answered as to what your opinion is on that. When it comes to what you were talking about, it being completely social housing, the City of Vancouver's approach, and I just asked staff for clarification on this last week, was to integrate different, not only income levels, but different rents together. So we're not, and I'm going to use the term ghettoizing housing, so we're not putting sort of the social housing over here and the market housing over there. This building, reading the policy report, does that. Do you agree with that approach?
I'm not saying that you have to segregate, but at the same time.
I know you're not saying that, but you don't have to answer my question, but do you agree with that approach?
I agree with not segregating. What I disagree with is that top margin is not affordable to a majority of the people in Vancouver, which doesn't give you the flexibility to try and maintain that project if the performer is not going to allow you to have less rent than that.
So do you, my last question is, do you think that these units that would be rented, and as you had mentioned, and you're correct, the policy report does state that people would have income of up to $100,000 a year per household. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be individuals, it would be per household. Do you think those units will go unrented?
Well, that's a good question, because if they go unrented, how are you going to pay for it? I mean, they're going to try.
I'm asking your opinion. Do you think in this rental market?
They're going to find capacity. There's a lot of people that want to come in and pay that.
Thank you.
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions for you. I just wanted to switch gears about the actual kind of core of this project, which is the new medical facilities. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on those.
You mean in terms of what they're proposing for the bottom level?
Yes.
Yeah. Like I said, those are components that I'm all for.
Okay.
You know, that's why I'm saying this is troubling, because there's components that sort of don't work and there's components that are really important.
Okay. And I mean, so it would be possible to kind of construct these things without any housing attached at all. So I guess that's another way to look at it too. Would you agree that that's kind of, I mean, that's kind of the traditional model, is to not attach housing in these kind of,
Well, why not explore that? Put all the numbers on the table and let the council members and the city look at it and say, what do we prefer?
so no housing at all would also be an option you'd want to explore?
If there's a trade-off that you're going to build those medical facilities and you're now going to take over the old ones and free them up, those can be turned into housing. I mean, there's nothing that says you have to blend these together. But the question is, you know, when you're trying to make this make sense, because there's some housing in there that sounds great, and you've got some, you know, medical, you know, programs that sound great, but then you've got problems that are going to crop in with affordability, then that becomes problematic.
Okay, thanks very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Great. On to Thomas Ferguson, please.